I just wanted to help my stepson and take him with me on a business trip. We crossed the line instead. It wasn't supposed to happen. I only meant to guide him, to give him an opportunity. Liam had been struggling after college, smart, driven, but stuck in that strange limbo between boy and man. His father, my husband, had been too caught up in his own world to notice, so when I was assigned an important corporate trip to London, I made a decision. "Come with me," I told him, dropping the idea casually over dinner. "You'll get to network, see how things work firsthand." He hesitated, but I saw the flicker of something in his eyes. Excitement, curiosity, maybe even relief that someone was finally giving him a chance. 2 days later, we boarded the plane. First class, thanks to my company. The seats were wide, luxurious, offering a kind of intimacy economy never could. The moment we settled in, I felt it. The shift in energy. Maybe it was the confined space, the warmth of his arm brushing mine, or the way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. The flight attendants moved through the cabin, dimming the lights for takeoff. A glass of champagne appeared in my hand, and I turned to see Liam sipping his own, his lips wet, his throat working as he swallowed. "You nervous?" I asked. He exhaled slowly. "A little, not about the flight, just about everything." I smiled, trying to keep things light. "This is your chance, Liam. Don't overthink it. Just enjoy the experience." He nodded, but there was something unreadable in his expression. Something I should have paid more attention to. The plane took off smoothly, climbing into the night sky. City lights disappeared beneath us, swallowed by darkness. The hum of the engines, the soft clinking of glasses, the hush of whispered conversations, all of it felt strangely intimate. Halfway through the flight, after dinner service had ended and the cabin fell into a gentle lull, Liam leaned closer. "This is nice," he murmured. I turned to him, surprised by the warmth in his voice. "Flying first class?" He shook his head, his gaze steady. "Being here, with you." Something shifted. My breath caught, and suddenly the space between us felt charged. I should have laughed it off, changed the subject, reminded him I was his stepmother. But I didn't. Because the truth was, I felt it too. And then came the turbulence. The turbulence hit suddenly, a sharp jolt that sent a ripple of gasps through the cabin. My champagne glass trembled in my grip, and I felt Liam's hand instinctively brush against mine on the armrest. "Just some rough air," I murmured, more to myself than to him. The plane dipped slightly, then steadied. The overhead lights flickered for a second before dimming back to their soft glow. Around us, other passengers settled back into their seats, some shifting under blankets, others lost in their in-flight entertainment. But Liam wasn't watching his screen. His gaze was fixed on me. It wasn't just gratitude for the trip. It wasn't just admiration. It was something deeper, heavier. I had seen that look before, in boardrooms, at dinners, from men who wanted something they weren't sure they should take. I should have broken the moment. I should have looked away. But I didn't. His fingers flexed on the armrest between us, and I became hyper-aware of how close we were. The quiet of the cabin made every breath feel amplified, every movement noticeable. I told myself it was the altitude, the exhaustion of a long day, the intimacy of being tucked away in first class while the world outside disappeared into the night. But when the plane shuddered again and his hand gripped my thigh instead of the armrest, just for balance, just for a second, I didn't pull away. I turned to him, heart pounding. "We should try to sleep," I said softly, though sleep was the last thing on my mind. Liam hesitated, searching my expression as if looking for something unspoken. Then, after a long beat, he nodded. But as I leaned back and closed my eyes, I could still feel the warmth of his touch lingering on my skin. And I knew this flight was going to change everything. The plane landed smoothly at JFK just as the sun began its slow descent behind the Manhattan skyline. The city stretched out before us, bathed in a golden haze, its towering buildings glowing against the dimming sky. Even after all my travels, there was something about New York that never lost its magic, its pulse, its energy, its sense that anything could happen. Beside me, Liam shifted in his seat, rolling the stiffness from his shoulders. He caught me watching him and offered a small, almost hesitant smile. "Welcome to New York," I murmured. A car was already waiting for us outside the terminal, sleek and black, its windows tinted against the chaos of the city. As we slid into the back seat, I noticed Liam's fingers tapping lightly against his knee. "Nervous?" I asked, trying to keep things light. He shook his head, exhaling slowly. "No, just a lot to take in." I nodded in understanding. New York had that effect. The ride into the city was quiet, the streets alive with movement, yellow cabs darting between lanes, pedestrians weaving through the chaos, neon signs flickering against the encroaching night. Liam stared out the window, eyes tracing the skyline. The hotel was perched on the edge of Central Park, modern and understated in its elegance. The concierge greeted us with polished efficiency, sliding 2 keycards across the marble counter. "Adjacent suites, just as requested," she said with a practiced smile. Liam shot me a glance, but he didn't say anything. Upstairs, the rooms were stunning. Floor-to-ceiling windows framing the park, crisp white linen stretched across a king-sized bed, and a sitting area that overlooked the glittering city below. I stepped toward the glass, pressing my fingers against the cool surface, taking in the view. Liam lingered in the doorway, his bag still slung over his shoulder. "This is incredible," he admitted. I turned to him, offering a small smile. "Make the most of it. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." He nodded, but his gaze didn't waver. The air between us was thick again, charged with something unspoken. I felt it in the way his fingers tightened around the strap of his bag, in the way his breath seemed just a little too controlled. I cleared my throat, trying to shake whatever this was. "You should get some rest." His jaw flexed slightly, like he was about to say something, but instead he exhaled and nodded. "Good night," he murmured, his voice softer than I expected. "Good night, Liam." The door clicked shut behind him. I let out a slow breath, turning back to the window, the city stretching out before me. This trip was meant to be a fresh start for him, a stepping stone into something bigger. But as I stood there, staring at the endless lights of New York, I couldn't shake the feeling that something else had already begun, something I wasn't sure I could stop. The city pulsed outside the hotel window, headlights streaking through the streets below, the distant hum of traffic a constant backdrop. I peeled off my blazer and sank onto the edge of the bed, rubbing my temples. Hours of travel had left me exhausted, my muscles tight from the flight. A hot shower. That's what I needed. I stood, making my way toward the bathroom, already unfastening the delicate clasp of my necklace. The suite's bathroom was extravagant. Marble countertops, a rainfall shower head, and plush white towels stacked neatly by the sink. I turned on the water, letting the steam rise, the air thickening with warmth. As I reached for the zipper of my dress, it caught. I frowned, twisting my arm to reach it better, but it was stuck, snagged in the fabric. I sighed in frustration, trying again, but the more I tugged, the more stubborn it became. I hesitated for a moment before stepping out of the bathroom and crossing the suite toward the connecting door. Liam's room. Pausing, I pressed my knuckles lightly against the wood. "Liam?" A beat of silence. Then the door opened and he stood there, hair slightly mussed, barefoot, his dress shirt unbuttoned at the collar, his brows lifted in quiet surprise. "Hey," he said. "Everything okay?" I exhaled, feeling foolish, but the dress wasn't going anywhere on its own. "I need a favor. My zipper. It's stuck." Liam's gaze flickered briefly over my shoulder toward the open bathroom door, steam curling from inside. Then he nodded, stepping forward. "Turn around," he said. His voice was steady, neutral. I did as he asked, my heart beating a fraction too fast as I felt him move closer. His fingers brushed the fabric at my back, A hesitant pause before he found the zipper. He tugged carefully, his knuckles grazing my spine as he worked it free. "There," he murmured, his breath warm against my shoulder. I swallowed, feeling the weight of the moment, the proximity, the way the air suddenly felt thick between us. I turned slightly, glancing over my shoulder to meet his eyes. "Thank you," I said softly. Liam held my gaze for a second longer than necessary. Then he stepped back, clearing his throat. "Yeah, no problem." He hesitated, as if debating whether to say something else, but then he nodded and stepped away, retreating back to his room. As the door clicked shut, I let out a slow breath, pressing a hand to my chest. This trip was supposed to be about his future, his career. So why did it feel like we were standing on the edge of something we couldn't take back? The warmth of the shower did little to ease the tension coiling in my chest. I stood under the stream, eyes closed, trying to quiet my thoughts. But every time I exhaled, I felt it again. The ghost of Liam's touch as he pulled down the zipper, the way his breath had been warm against my skin for just a second too long. It was nothing, just a simple gesture, but my body refused to believe that. By the time I stepped out of the bathroom, wrapped in a thick robe, my pulse had slowed, but my mind was still restless. I walked toward the window, pressing my forehead lightly against the cool glass. New York glittered below, endless and alive, the city humming with possibilities. A soft knock at the connecting door startled me. I hesitated before stepping toward it, my fingers grazing the handle. When I opened it, Liam stood there, looking hesitant, hands tucked into the pockets of his slacks. His shirt was still undone at the collar, his sleeves rolled to his elbows, exposing his forearms. He exhaled, shaking his head slightly. "I don't know why I knocked." I arched a brow. "You couldn't sleep?" A small, almost sheepish smile. "Yeah, that, and..." He hesitated, searching my face. Something feels different." I swallowed, my fingers tightening around the edge of my robe. "Liam." "I know," he murmured, stepping closer. "I know this trip was supposed to be about business, about me learning from you, and I'm grateful for that, I am." He exhaled. "But something's changed, hasn't it?" The air between us thickened, heavy with unspoken words. I should have denied it, laughed it off, said he was imagining things. But I didn't, because it had changed. Liam took another step forward, his presence close, intoxicating in a way I hadn't let myself acknowledge until now. His eyes searched mine, waiting, hesitant, like he needed permission. My breath came shallow. "We shouldn't..." "I know." His voice was barely a whisper. "But do you want to stop?" My pulse pounded in my ears. He was too close now, too warm, too steady, too sure, and I was unraveling, my resolve slipping. His fingers lifted, brushing against my jaw, a tentative, testing touch. My skin burned where he touched me. I should have pulled away, but instead I leaned in. Liam exhaled sharply like he hadn't expected it, and then, slowly, carefully, he closed the distance between us. His lips brushed against mine, barely a kiss, just the lightest whisper of contact. But it set off something electric inside me, something I wasn't ready to name. I let out a shaky breath, my hands hovering at his chest. "Liam." His forehead rested against mine, his breathing uneven. "Tell me to stop," he murmured, "and I will." I opened my mouth, but no words came, because I didn't want him to. The silence between us was deafening, the weight of the moment pressing down on my chest. Liam's forehead was still resting against mine, his breath warm, uneven, matching my own. My hands hovered at his chest, feeling the unsteady rise and fall beneath my fingertips. I should have stepped back. I should have ended this right here before it spiraled into something neither of us could control. But I didn't. Instead, my fingers curled slightly against the fabric of his shirt, gripping just enough for him to notice. A silent acknowledgement, a surrender I wasn't ready to name. His breath hitched and then, slowly, He lifted his hand, his fingertips tracing along my jaw, his thumb skimming the corner of my lips. A touch so light, so hesitant, yet it sent a shiver down my spine. "This is dangerous," I whispered, though my voice lacked conviction. "I know," he murmured, his lips still barely grazing mine. "But tell me you don't feel it too." I couldn't. Because the truth was, I did feel it. The pull, the undeniable gravity of whatever was happening between us. It had been there for days, maybe even longer, waiting beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to unravel. And here we were. Liam's hand slid to the nape of my neck, his fingers threading through damp strands of my hair, his touch steady even as I felt him tremble slightly against me. My breath came in shallow, uneven bursts. If we do this, it doesn't go away. His eyes darkened, his grip tightening just slightly like he was anchoring himself. I don't want it to. Before I could stop myself, before I could think of all the reasons this was wrong, my lips parted, and his name slipped from my tongue in a whisper I couldn't take back. That was all it took. His lips met mine again, this time with purpose, with certainty, no longer tentative but desperate. The kiss was slow, deep, a collision of everything unspoken between us. Liam pressed forward, his body impossibly close, his hand sliding down to the small of my back. A warmth flooded through me, igniting something I had fought too long to suppress. I should stop. I need to stop. But as he kissed me, his hands careful yet possessive, his breath tangled with mine, I knew. I wasn't going to. Liam's lips moved against mine with a slow urgency, as if he was memorizing the moment, burning it into his skin the same way it was burning into mine. My hands had somehow found their way to his shoulders, my fingers gripping the fabric of his shirt as if letting go would send me plummeting from some unseen height. We weren't supposed to be here. We weren't supposed to be doing this. And yet I couldn't pull away. Liam's hands traced the curve of my waist, hesitant yet deliberate, as though waiting for me to stop him. But I didn't. My body betrayed me, pressing into his, silently asking for more. "This is crazy," I murmured against his lips, my voice trembling, unsure if I was trying to convince him or myself. He exhaled a shaky breath. "I don't care." Neither did I. The city lights flickered beyond the massive windows, but they felt miles away, as if we existed in a world of our own, suspended in a moment that shouldn't have been possible but somehow was. Liam's lips traced a path down my jaw, lingering at the hollow of my throat. My head tipped back instinctively, a soft gasp escaping me before I could stop it. His hand skimmed lower, finding the tie of my robe, and then he hesitated. A pause, a silent question. I opened my eyes, finding his, dark and searching. This was it. The moment where we decided if this was a mistake, we would stop before it went too far, or one we would carry with us forever. My fingers trembled as I reached for the buttons of his shirt, undoing them one by one. I wasn't thinking anymore, just feeling, just surrendering to something I could no longer fight. Liam groaned softly as my hands brushed against his skin, and suddenly, I was being lifted. His arms wrapped around me, carrying me toward the bed with a certainty that made my breath hitch. The mattress was cool against my back, the contrast to his warmth dizzying. He hovered above me, his weight pressing just enough to make me aware of every inch of him. My robe slipped from my shoulders, pooling around me, leaving me bare beneath his gaze. Liam exhaled sharply, his fingers tracing along my collarbone, his touch reverent. "You're beautiful," he murmured, almost like he hadn't meant to say it out loud. I swallowed, my heart pounding against my ribs. "Liam." His lips brushed against mine again, slower this time, more controlled. His hand slipped lower, grazing over my hip, and I felt him, hard, ready, waiting for permission he wasn't sure I would give. This was the edge. This was the point where the last shred of logic should have saved me. But as Liam looked down at me, his chest rising and falling with ragged breaths, his fingers gripping my waist as if grounding himself, I knew. I wasn't stopping. Not this time.